Welcome back. Last time I asked you to translate 3 sentences from English to hieroglyphs that contain our new vocabulary words. First was, the crocodile is in the river. Well, it's the same old drill. Start with the verb is, pronounced you. Then we add the subject, our crocodile, meza. Now we need our old friend the owl for in. And last, we need the word for river, iteru. And that's it. The crocodile is in the river. Eu meza em iteru. Good. Our second sentence was the moon rejoices when the sun is in the horizon. Poetic, isn't it? This is a compound sentence, one with 2 verbs and 2 subjects. Start with the verb to rejoice, resh. Next, we add the subject, which is moon, yeah. The when is understood, so we don't include a word for that. What we next need is the second verb, which is, because the second half of the sentence is, the sun is in the horizon. So we add eu, the reed and the quail chick for is. Now we need the word for sun. That's easy. It's ray. Next, we need the in, which is our owl. Last, we add horizon, achet. And we have it. Resh, yeah, eu, ray, em, achet. The moon rejoices when the sun is in the horizon. Good. In this sentence, we have the word for horizon, but we haven't seen it for a while. How do we remember it? You can, of course, search your dictionary, and you'll find it on the A page, so the search won't be too long. But other words that are further down in the dictionary will take longer to find. I suggest that after each lecture, when you're adding your new vocabulary to your dictionaries, read all your words aloud, followed by the meaning. It won't take too long. We really don't have that many vocabulary words, but that will help them stick. Our last sentence is another one with rejoice in it, and it too is a compound sentence. The land rejoices because Ptah is in the city. Again, we start with our verb resh, rejoice. Add the word for land, ta. It's an ideogram, but no stroke. Remember, be flexible. They wrote it all kinds of ways. There's no word for because, so it's understood. Now comes the second part of our compound sentence. So we start with the verb eu, is. Now add the subject, ptah. Last, we add in the city. The in is the owl. We always remember that. And we know the word for city, niwit. And that's it for our English to hieroglyphs homework. Good. Now, let's look at the hieroglyph translations. These are the ones involving our new suffix pronouns. I gave you 2 sentences. Let's start with the first, the long one. It's long, but you can do it. As usual, we start with a verb. It's ma'ah, to see. Next is the word for man, z. So we know a man is seeing something. Our next word, sat, means daughter. But right after it is a viper. And this is one of our suffix pronouns, meaning he or his. So it must be his daughter. Next, we have our owl, which will mean in, because we can see house is coming next. Tacked onto house, per, is the viper again. So it will be his house. Now, continuing right along, we see another verb, eu, is. So we have a compound sentence, one with 2 verbs and 2 subjects. After is, we have our viper again. So now we know the viper is he. Next is our owl again, and that's the word in. Our last word is the long one, reshwet, which means joy. So putting it all together, we have The man sees his daughter in his house. He is in joy. In English, we don't usually say enjoy, but this is an ancient Egyptian idiom. It's the real thing. To make the sentence smooth, we can add an understood when at the very beginning, and that gives us, when the man sees his daughter in his house, he is in joy. Excellent. Our next sentence had a mythological overtone. We have our verb, ja, which has the ja biliteral that represents the two sounds, dj and a. The vulture is the phonetic complement that reminds us of the ah sound. The boat's the determinative, telling us the word has something to do with boats. The word means to ferry across. Now we have to find out who it is that's ferrying across. Well, it's Re, the sun god. Note that in this text, his name is written with two determinatives, the solar disk and the god determinative. There are lots of variations. From the next word, pet, we can see that Re is ferrying across the sky. Next we have the owl, in. And that's followed by the word wea, which is a sacred boat. Now, added onto the sacred boat is a suffix pronoun, the horned viper. We are now very familiar with this little fellow, and we know he means his. So, if we put it all together, we have Re ferries across the sky in his sacred boat. It would sound like Ja, Re, Pet, Em, Wea, F. And that's our homework. Now, I'd like to do some practice exercises with you so that we learn our suffix pronouns. Let's practice translating from English to hieroglyphs. But let me explain why. We've been doing both English to hieroglyphs and hieroglyphs to English sentences. I'm sure you've discovered that it's more difficult to translate from English to hieroglyphs than the other way around. The reason is that when we have a hieroglyphic sentence in front of us, we don't have to create it, we don't have to think about how the words are spelled, we don't have to remember grammatical rules for the ordering of words. All we have to do is recognize the words, and the translation will follow. When we have to create the hieroglyphic sentence, we need to know how to spell the words, what order they go in. We have to remember that the word for this comes after the noun, but the word for another comes before it. Because so much more thinking is involved in English to hieroglyph translation, this is where the learning really takes place. When you have to look up a word's spelling and then write it, that's when you learn it. This is why I love doing English to hieroglyphs. I know that we are never going to write a letter to an ancient Egyptian. But if you could write that letter, think how easy it would be to translate the reply. So for today, let's do lots of English to hieroglyph sentences using our suffix pronouns. That's how we'll learn them. To help you learn the suffix pronouns, you might want to make a chart of them. You can use the same format we use for our dictionary. Start with a hieroglyphic word, then add the pronunciation, and last, add the meaning. I, me, my. Then do the other pronouns. For example, you could do he, his, him, its, and we can even indicate whether it's masculine or feminine. Or we could do they, them, their. That's our chart. Suffix pronouns let us have more variety in our sentences, but we still don't have too many verbs or nouns yet. So there'll be some repetition, but that's okay. The repetition is how we will learn our suffix pronouns. For now, feel free to have your pronoun chart in front of you so you can look them up. After a while, I don't think you'll have to look them up at all. So let's start. First sentence. We send the boat to her city. We all know we begin with the verb, to send, which is hab. Now, for our suffix pronoun, it's we send. So we need to look it up in our pronoun chart. We find the suffix pronoun for we. It's towards the bottom of the chart because it's a plural. There it is. It's the water sign with 3 strokes. So we suffix the water sign and 3 strokes to send, and it's we send. Good. Boat is easy. Everyone remembers that word. It's funny how some words are easier to remember than others. It's debit. The little boat at the end of the word is the determinative. Now we need the to. And since it's to a place, the city, we use the mouth R. Good. Next is city. And that's another one that everyone remembers, niwit. Now comes the suffix pronoun, her. This is where we use our suffix pronoun to indicate possession. So we attach it to the noun. You probably remember that she or her, for the feminine it even, for that matter, is the folded cloth S. So we add the folded cloth to city, niwit, and we have her city. So that's it. We send the boat to her city. Good, you're getting it. Okay, let's use some other pronouns. How would we say you, feminine singular, ferry across the river in our boat? We start with the verb ja, to ferry across. Now, for the suffix pronoun for you, feminine singular, that's the tethering ring, ch, ch. So you, young lady, are ferrying across. It's not just ferrying across, it's ferrying across the river. So we add our relatively new vocabulary word for river, itaru. In is easy. We use it so often. It's the owl. Now we just need our boat. Boat, debit, comes first because our is a suffix pronoun and must be added to the end of a word. So the word order is boat hour. We write the word for boat. This time, just for practice and fun, let's write it as an ideogram. Just the boat with a stroke. Good. Now we just have to add the suffix pronoun for our. Again, it's near the bottom of our pronoun chart because it's plural. It is the same word for we and is written with the water sign and 3 strokes. Ja, ch, iteru, em, depet, en. That's how it sounded. So that's you ferry across the river in our boat. Good. Let's try another sentence. How about they talk to our scribe and she listens? By the way, there were a few female scribes in ancient Egypt, but very few. Again, we begin with the verb to say or talk, which is dejed. Now comes our suffix pronoun, they, which is plural, so we can look it up at the bottom of our personal pronoun chart and find that it's sen, the folded cloth, water sign, and 3 strokes. That's they talk. Next is the to, which is the water sign because it's to a person. It's to our scribe. We're now getting pretty good about the word order. We know the suffix pronoun for our has to go after the noun attached to it. So the next word is scribe, which is sesh. That's another word that everyone remembers. It's fun to draw. And to it we attach the our, which we can look up in the pronoun chart if we need to. It's the same as we. So it's the water sign and 3 strokes. Now, all we need is and she listens. The and is understood. No written word for it. So we just need she listens. We can use our old verb, sejum, to hear, same as listens. And by now, you probably remember that she is the folded cloth. So we add that to listen. And it would have sounded something like, dejed sen en sesh en sejumes. And that completes our sentence. They talk to our scribe, and she listens. I think you can see now, with repetition, the suffix pronouns are not so daunting. They're becoming old friends. Let's do just a few more suffix pronoun sentences. I don't want to overload you. Let's try, he rejoices when his daughter goes down to their house. It's a long sentence. Yes, we start with the verb resh, to rejoice. Now comes our suffix pronoun, he, which I bet you remember by now is the viper F. So we add the viper to resh. He rejoices. The when is understood. So we go to the next verb, to go down, which is ha. It's his daughter who goes down to the house, right? So we're now, quite familiar with the word order. Daughter, then suffix pronoun. So we add sat, daughter, and then attach the suffix pronoun, his, to it. That's the horned viper, which by now you probably remember. Coming to the end, we just need to their house. The to is the mouth R, since it's to a place, the house. You might be tempted to stack the viper on top of the mouth, and you wouldn't be totally wrong. That was done. However, because we have a suffix pronoun, usually the mouth would be considered a separate word, so I haven't stacked them. Now, everyone knows house, per, comes first, and then there. So we add the house. And to it, we add there. We might have to look this one up in our suffix pronoun chart, but that's no problem. We can find that there is the folded cloth, water sign, and 3 strokes. Resh, F, ha, sat, F, R, per, sen. That's how you write it and say it. He rejoices when his daughter goes down to their house. Excellent. Let's do one more, just to make sure that we have our pronouns down pat. He hears the crocodile from his house upon their road. Okay. We start with hears, which is sejem, the one with the ear. We, of course, know that he is the viper. Next, we need our crocodile, meze. Now we need from, and that's our owl. Remember, owl means a lot of things. His house is easy by now. It's house his, and his is the viper. Now it's time to use a word we haven't used much, upon. Remember what it is? It's her, the face with the stroke. How about road? Yes, it's a word with a wa biliteral, and it's feminine with a T, so it's pronounced wat. It's their road, so we'll add the folded cloth, water sign, and the 3 strokes for there. You did it. That's our last suffix pronoun sentence. He hears the crocodile from his house upon their road. That would be pronounced something like sejem F, meze M, per F, her, wat, sen. It's a mouthful, but it's good. Okay. For your homework assignment, I'll take it easy on you. I'm going to give you 2 sentences to translate from hieroglyphs to English. This should seem like a piece of cake to you by now. The first one is, you'll get it, just break it up into words. And here's the second. When you do these sentences, start by breaking them down into words and transliterating. Then the translation will be easy. Today for vocabulary, I just want to give you one word, but I would also like to explain the main hieroglyph that is at the root of the word. In its fullest form, the word looks like this. It was pronounced cheper, and the root is the beetle. It's a triliteral hieroglyph equal to the sound ch, p, all 3, one after the other. Cheper. Both the hieroglyphic scarab and the actual beetle were very important in ancient Egypt. As we've seen, the scarab hieroglyph was pronounced cheper. It meant to exist. But it also meant beetle, the bug. Now, the dung beetle was very special to the Egyptians. The female lays its eggs in a dung ball and then rolls it to a safe place and buries it. Later, lots of little scarabs pop out, like magic. The Egyptians didn't understand the biological process of this. So to them, this was a remarkable case of procreation. Thus, the beetle became a symbol of existence. That's why they carved little beetles as amulets to be worn to ensure continued existence. Let me show you an Egyptian scarab. So when you wore a scarab around your neck, you would exist forever. It's a magical amulet. When the pharaoh Amenhotep III wanted to make announcements to the world, he had large scarabs, and carved on the bottom, he wrote his message. These scarabs were about the size of a large paperweight, so you'd have plenty of room for the text. Perhaps one of his most famous scarabs was the one announcing his marriage to Queen Tai. He mentions that her parents are Yuya and Tuya, letting everyone know they're commoners. But you better accept my queen. A second commemorative scarab announced that he had built a pleasure lake for Queen Tai so she could sail her new boat. What's important about this text is that he mentions the name of the boat, the Aten Gleams. The Aten Gleams. This has led some scholars to suggest that Akhenaten, their son, who worshipped only the Aten, may have gotten the idea from his mother. So scarabs were very important in ancient Egypt. There was even a god named Khepri, who was depicted with the body of a man and the head of a scarab. We will also see scarabs in the names of many pharaohs. We've done quite a bit of hieroglyphs today. Now let's talk about the people who produced them, the scribes. Last time I told you about papyrus lancing, which exhorts the young men of Egypt to become scribes. The papyrus doesn't talk about the joys of forming hieroglyphs with a reed brush or the pleasure of reading. No, it doesn't do that. Rather, the budding scribe is given materialistic reasons for choosing the profession. You will meet people of higher status. You'll advance your position. You won't smell like a tanner. Your arms won't be tired from manual labor. Be a scribe. Although the social position of the scribe was continuously revered throughout Egyptian history, there was at least one voice in the conversation who did not agree. The Greek philosopher Plato lived between about 428 and 348 BC and was well aware of Egyptian civilization. He died just before Alexander the Great entered Egypt and before the Ptolemies began their rule. But like most Greeks, he admired the far older culture of ancient Egypt, but not writing. Plato actually lamented the invention of writing. This strange belief was shared by his teacher, Socrates. Socrates, one of the founders of the Greek philosophical method, never wrote anything down. And I don't think this is an accident. What we know today about him comes from a body of works called the Dialogues. Socrates often had philosophical discussions with his students, Plato included. And these dialogues were written down by the students for future generations. In several of the dialogues, Socrates discusses the invention of writing. He credits the invention of writing to the Egyptian god of writing, Thoth, who is often depicted as an ibis-headed man. In chapter 125 of the Book of the Dead, the deceased's heart is weighed against the feather of truth to determine if he'll be admitted to the next world. Standing next to the balance scale is Thoth, scribe's palette in hand, recording the result. Socrates was aware of the tradition that Thoth invented writing, and while he credits him with the invention, He laments the day writing was conceived. Socrates believes that with writing, man will no longer have knowledge. He will merely have the appearance of knowledge. For Socrates, knowledge is in your mind. Writing is external to the mind, so it can't be knowledge. Remember, the ancient Greeks were memorists. When you said you knew the Iliad, that meant you could recite it. Merely reading it was not knowledge. Socrates was afraid man would lose his memory skills if he relied on Thoth's invention of writing. For Socrates, the writing of bureaucratic records, tax lists, that's fine. What's important is knowledge, real knowledge. But the highest knowledge, philosophical truths, couldn't be written. As we saw from papyrus lancing, the Egyptians didn't agree. They offered materialistic reasons for becoming a scribe. But there are other papyri that give more idealistic reasons for becoming a scribe. One papyrus in the British Museum, Papyrus Chester Beatty IV, links being a scribe with immortality. Now, there's a reason to be a scribe. The papyrus was written during the New Kingdom, a time when Egypt had already collapsed twice. Once at the end of the Old Kingdom, and once at the end of the Middle Kingdom. Both collapses led to periods of lawlessness, tomb robbing, and general disillusionment with life. For the first time, people saw the uncertainty of life, that continuity couldn't be guaranteed, that even building a stone tomb didn't guarantee your mummy would be preserved so you could be resurrected in the next world. Papyrus Chester Beatty IV fully acknowledges all those uncertainties and suggests that being a scribe is the only sure route to immortality. But it's a different kind of immortality than what was promised by the Egyptian religion. It's the immortality of being an author. The papyrus says, man decays, his corpse is dust. All his kin have perished. But a book makes him remembered through the mouth of the reader. Better is a book than a well-built house. The tomb chapels in the West, better than a solid mansion, than a stela in a temple. Talking about scribes, the author says, the reed pen is their child, the stone surface their wife. Death made them forgotten, but books made them remembered. So scribes live on through their writings. This is different from the traditional belief in resurrection of the physical body, but it's still in line with the old Egyptian maxim, to say the name of the dead is to make him live again. This may be why, at the end of a papyrus text, often the scribe who copied it would put his name. That way, whenever anyone read the text, they would read the scribe's name and he would live again. We've been looking at what papyri have to tell us, but I should also say something about papyrus itself, the medium on which scribes wrote. Papyrus was a very important medium for writing, and many of the sentences we use as exercises in this course were written on papyrus. Papyrus was viewed as less permanent than stone, but in Egypt's dry climate, papyri have survived for thousands of years quite well. Let's take a close look at papyrus and how it was produced. Papyrus grew along the banks of the Nile. It would grow to more than 10 feet tall, with a diameter of about 4 inches. To make it into papyrus sheets, it was harvested. The stalks were cut into sections about 12 inches long. These cylinders were then cut into thin strips. Next, the strips were placed on a board and overlapped. Then this was beaten with a wood mallet or pressed so the sap comes out and serves as the glue that binds the strips together. The overlapping strips were then left in the sun, and when they dried, voila, you had a sheet of papyrus. If you hold it up to the light, you can see the strips. When dry, the sheet would be burnished with a smooth stone to prepare the surface for writing. Individual sheets could be glued together to make a papyrus roll as long as you wanted. Some were more than 100 feet long. Papyrus was used for bureaucratic records, literary productions, and also religious texts, like the Book of the Dead. Papyrus facilitated international commerce and eventually became so important that during the Ptolemaic period, it was one of Egypt's largest exports. In later times, it was said that if the papyrus crop failed in Egypt, Rome wouldn't have been able to conduct business. Papyrus used to grow wild in Egypt on the banks of the Nile, but not anymore. Industrialization has ended that. Today, it's farmed to make into sheets so artists can paint ancient scenes to be sold to tourists. You can buy sheets of papyrus in most large art supply stores, and you might enjoy trying to write on the real thing. But for your homework, you can still do it on ordinary notepaper. I'll see you next time.